And it's really a pleasure to be here with you all. I am David Zipper, and we're going to now get a little more interactive and talk about a topic that is near and dear to me, how to design a future city. I am managing director at 1776, which is a startup hub based here in Washington that supports startups all around the world that are really transforming life-critical sectors, including smart cities and transportation. So I get to have the privilege of working with technology companies that are thinking about what cities are going to look like 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from now, and with mayors thinking about it as well. And I think for those of us who are thinking about urban change, it's an incredibly exciting time to be delving into these issues, because with technology moving as it is, with populations in cities growing the way that they are in the US and abroad, you're seeing tremendous opportunities, but also real risks. And we have such a wonderful panel here today with a variety of different backgrounds to delve into those issues. So I'm going to introduce everyone really quickly. We're going to jump right in. There will be time for questions, and I'm hoping people have already been briefed on how to text or tweet those questions that you may have. Is that right? No. Oh, that's exciting. Well, we'll figure that out. But just write it down for now, and then we'll tell you how to convey said questions to us later on. We got a few minutes to figure that one out. But first, in terms of who we're gathered here with, we have, starting from my left, Kevin Roberts is the Vice President of Development at Jair Lynch. Isabel Castilla is a principal with James Corner Field Operations and was involved with the Highline Project design, which we're all very familiar with in New York. Marina Martins is the producer and co-founder and CEO of Pigmental Studios. Avery Ash is an autonomous vehicle market strategist at INRIX, which is a great title, autonomous vehicle market strategist. And Demian Costa is a managing partner with Sagamore Ventures. And they'll tell you more about what they work on as we go forward, but I want to jump right in. And to kick things off and to provide some context, I'd like to ask each panelist, so starting with you, Kevin, when you think about the future of cities, what cities are going to look like, particularly in the US 10 years from now, what looming change gets you the most excited, and what one risk scares you? Go ahead.
Thank you.
It's not on.
Well, Kevin Roberts with Jair Lynch Real Estate Partners, and I lead a number of projects that are mixed use in Washington, D.C., really where the nexus of commerce, community building, and architecture meet. And we're developing a project right across from the National Ballpark, in addition to several other projects around the city. We have about 2 million square feet in the pipeline, and we often look for ways to integrate art into the building, into the community involvement, and lead it onto our marketing program. What I'm excited about is, as a developer, I'm inherently confident in my abilities, which is maybe a hubris, but the opportunity for change. I think what New York has demonstrated over the last 25 years, from the 80s, its ability to, and understanding that cities must rejuvenate, they must reinvent themselves. And I think cities around the country have started to pick up on that and recognize that even though a big redevelopment project may have happened in the 60s or 70s, we must continue to look for opportunity to reinvent and reinvigorate the city and find new ways to live and lead the population going forward. What I'm scared about, so I'm not worried about cities in general. What I'm concerned about is the concentrations of power and wealth in certain cities on the coast, and it leading to more a dumbbell effect in our economy in the United States. You've read a lot about retail stores closing, like Sears, like Staples. We're starting to see retail become the ground plane for the manifestation of these economic disparities. So high street retail is doing really fantastic. So that's the $200 pair of jeans store, the high-end restaurants, and then Walmarts are doing well. The middle and the middle class is beginning to suffer, and cities without middle class will begin to change and transform in ways I don't particularly see.
Great. Isabel.
Hi. Oh, my microphone works. Okay, good. So as I was introduced, my name is Isabel Castilla, and I'm a principal at James Corner Field Operations. And what we are is a landscape architecture and urban design firm that particularly specializes in developing public spaces and parks in areas that many people would perhaps not think would be candidates for such spaces, remnant spaces of the city that are areas that need public space, but the space actually hasn't been allocated or doesn't exist. I'm the project manager for the High Line in New York City, which many of you may know. It's an elevated park built on a pre-existing elevated railway. And I'm also working on a number of other projects around the US that are very relevant to our conversation. One of them being the Underline Park in Miami. It's a 10-mile long linear park that we're developing under an elevated metro rail. So a piece of remnant land, a piece of infrastructure that, due to its location, actually is a very strong spine and connector of communities that a local citizen decided to develop into a park. We're also recently being commissioned to develop a master plan for the C&O Canal right here in Georgetown. So given my experience and what I work on, one of the things that excites me the most about the future of cities is continually developing these kinds of public spaces that occur in areas that are already surrounded by development, areas where perhaps development is getting ahead of the need for public spaces, areas for recreation or culture, and actually developing these kind of squeezed in between everything else to provide those amenities for the public. Miami being one example, the first phase that we're working on the Underline is getting developed at Brickell, which is a neighborhood that's growing so rapidly. It's basically all skyscrapers, and no one actually has developed public spaces that go in par with those new developments. Therefore, all of the new residents actually have nowhere to go. So the future of the cities I see as this challenge of finding pockets of spaces to develop public areas that really bring the community together. What concerns me the most about the future is actually that unmeasured development that does not leave space for recreation, space for culture, and trying to basically, I guess, maneuver all of these different developments to actually find those opportunities and continue enriching the landscape of the city in a way that actually benefits all the citizens.
Great. Thanks. Marina, and if for the remaining three, if we can nail it with bullets, because I'm told there's a video looming and we have a lot of questions to get to as well. All you.
So glad he said that, because I was never going to be able to speak as eloquently. So Pigmental Studios is an animation studio. We're out of Los Angeles and got, I think the word is seduced, into Washington, D.C., and I came here fully embracing this adventure, and I'm incredibly excited that I'm here. So as a storyteller, as a creative, I get the privilege of being able to just create whatever city I want, and we do that frequently. I think what we bring to the table is that we can think outside the box. We can force the change in the physical world to engage with our creative endeavors, and I think that makes us a very powerful and important part of the dynamic that we have here. So what excites me about cities is that it's an engagement of such a huge variety of concepts and ideas and thoughts and visions and goals. But what scares me, I think, is that can go south, and it can be a powder keg, and we can create the sort of apocalyptic sort of environments that we envision in our storytelling, that I think we should be very careful about considering as we build our cities today.
Thanks. And before we go to you, Avery, I think we have solved the question of how to submit questions. If you have questions, you can tweet it by using #FutureCity. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. Go ahead.
Great. I'm Avery Ash. As David said, I'm an autonomous vehicle market strategist. That doesn't really mean a whole lot. I work for a company called INRIX, based out of Seattle, Washington. We're a startup that's about 10 years old. But I've been here in Washington, D.C. for 12 years, working at issues at the intersection of transportation and technology. Now taking that and looking at, in an autonomous world, how does a connected vehicle, how does a vehicle data company provide value in this new space? What excites me the most about this kind of future of urban, in particular urban mobility, is the success of the smart cities campaigns. Hopefully everybody in this audience has heard this term smart city. I think that's exciting that people are beginning to think about how can cities do things better, how can cities be smarter. What concerns me the most is the shortcut to try to become viewed as a smart city rather than trying to actually become a smart city. So my hope is that we can hold our cities a little more accountable to using data, not just to drive better decisions, but to hold those decisions accountable and make sure that they're actually having an impact for citizens.
Thanks.
All right. Welcome, folks. Good morning. I'm Demian Costa from Sagamore Ventures. So I have the really fun job of investing for the guy that founded Under Armour, Mr. Kevin Plank. And I invest for a couple of reasons, but mainly it's to increase economic activity and increase economic development in the city of Baltimore. So, I invest in everything from skateboards to robots and kind of all stuff in between. And I'm actually pretty fortunate to be a part of a project which is, I think it's one of the largest, if not the largest, urban revitalization projects in the country called Port Covington. It's happening right up the street. And although I'm on the sidelines of this, so if there are very specific questions at the end, I'll make it up or try to find out later. But it's interesting because we have this opportunity to really build a future city on a blank slate, right? And that doesn't really exist in too many different cities across the U.S. You've got this area that is adjacent to the metropolitan area, but for the most part, it's just a barren wasteland. Actually, I think you could probably bring a bow and bow hunt if you wanted to. It's so open. But so we're designing it from scratch, and after many, many hours of toil yesterday, we figured out how to actually show this video. So I'm going to show a 1 and 50-second video on the Port Covington project, and then I'll probably kick it back over to the panelists. So if you guys got that queued up, watch this. How about that? All right. Yeah. So the problem was the track was like a Justin Timberlake song, and we didn't have the rights to it. So I didn't even know what the background music would be until just now. It turned out okay. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's dive in. Actually, let's keep it on thinking about real estate. When I see that video, I'm reminded actually of what I was doing before I was in 1776 when I was leading economic development strategy for a couple mayors here in Washington, D.C. And in that role, there would be particular kinds of companies or sometimes arts installations that we'd be particularly excited in the mayor's office to attract and recruit because of the potential transformative benefits to the surrounding neighborhood, creating jobs and improving quality of life. I'm thinking of a couple major technology companies that we look to recruit into the city. I remember the excitement, some of you are going to remember this, I bet, when H Street Playhouse moved to Anacostia, thinking that could really be a positive, have a positive force in that community of historic Anacostia. So my question, and this is really open-ended, but we have a lot of different folks who will have, I think, perspectives on this. What kinds of companies or arts assets, if you will, do you think have the most transformative and positive impact on the future of a city or the future of a neighborhood?
Well, for DC, my mic's still not working. Yeah.
Doesn't sound that way.
Okay.
Just belt it out. Belt it out. Dude. You want mine?
Hello?
Shared economy.
I think it's you, not the mic. Yeah, here, try mine.
Hello? Yes. Okay. Jeez. So DC is rich with some invaluable assets that we obviously take advantage of, and that the monuments and statues, and also the museums that bring in great artwork from around the world. And what I'm hopeful for is cultivating more artists in DC or in the Mid-Atlantic region. So I'll admit that I was a little very disappointed that we lost the Corcoran, but we still have great assets in MICA and VCU. Those artist communities and cultural institutions will help bring artists into the city. And for us as a real estate development company, we are very excited about what building across from the Nationals ballpark, a urban streetscape that will have an upgraded public space, really turning the bullpen, if you're familiar with it. This is a really festive area right next to the baseball stadium where a lot of concerts and pre-game activities and post-game activities occur. We're bringing that action and activity onto the street, surrounded by art events, artists, and inside our building we actually have a pop-up space to provide white box space for artists to exhibit. What I also recognize is that what we're not going to solve is housing for artists, or not one person, any one person sitting up here will solve the full equation of how artists and arts prosper and help a company proceed and excel. But that's what we're excited about. I think the opportunity to cultivate local artists is still a great opportunity for DC, so they don't flee, and creating a great space so they don't flee to New York and LA.
Sure. So I think to add to that, for me what's very interesting is when an institution or a company invests on bringing what they do, whether it's art or something else, out to the community, and allows various people from the community to actually experience that and enrich their life with it. Whether it's creating public spaces or creating art installations that actually bring the message down to something that's easily digestible. And one example that I would like to add is the National Building Museum. We had the opportunity to develop the icebergs installation last summer. I was actually the designer for that installation. And what I found very enriching about that idea of actually bringing art and culture and design out to the general public is that the premise that we were given by the Building Museum was to create an installation that was fun, an installation that had a specific message, and also something that was able to speak about design, in particular landscape architecture, to the general public. So in developing that, in having that kind of, directive, we came up with an installation that had a variety of different messages that really brought art down to anyone that actually visited the installation. There was something interesting. It was fun and playful for families and kids. It spoke about climate change in a way that was more, palpable to people. Many people speak about the melting of glaciers and icebergs, but very few people have the opportunity to actually go and see them in person. So to create an environment that spoke about that landscape became very relevant, especially as school kids, teenagers understood that. But also the idea of talking about design and what it means to create a landscape with a series of objects that we could actually very physically speak about. And I found that incredibly enriching as I gave tours to different school kids, to different families, to talk about all the different layers just in one art installation and really bring that out to the community. So I think opportunities like that are fantastic to really create a variety of messages at different levels that actually can reach a variety of people around DC.
Demian, I'll put you on the spot with this. So let's say that we have a genie. It's a unique kind of genie right in front of you. Rub what is it, a lantern that a genie's in, the bottle? But it gives one wish to you. It's a specific kind of wish. You can have whatever tenant you want in the project, but it has to be an arts tenant that can have the most catalytic impact of, for the whole project. Whatever you want, you'll get it. What kind of a project do you ask for?
You see, you just threw me off with the arts tenant, right? Because I was going to say, your original question was about, what kind of company is the most exciting for these cities and the most transformative, and I think it's companies that make stuff, okay. Right? And if it's an art tenant, then I would hope that it's someone that's doing some sort of larger installations that can actually build, create, and design, and have a software component, and have this sort of this hardware software aspect to it, because it employs a diverse number of people, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't want to make this about diving into employment problems and diversity and all that other stuff, but I think that when you look at these cities, at least through my lens, I'm focused on a city like Baltimore, but you've got like Cleveland's and Cincinnati's and a lot of these cities that really led America through the Industrial Revolution with manufacturing. We saw that leave over the last 4 to 5 decades, and now there's a lot of focus on bringing it back. You can see it upstairs in some of these like local goods being made. There's a focus on local goods. But a very, very impactful company to have in these cities and the future of cities when we go forward is we have to figure out a way to have companies be present that actually make things, but they need to have most certainly a technological aspect woven into it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the arts come in, because this ability to create, this ability to weave in technology into things that we make is going to allow it to stand the test of time as we continue to evolve and not make it just about repetitive process of reproducing just the same old commodity, but something that's very unique. And that's why I think the arts are very important in these types of companies.
Well, let's switch gears just a little bit, and Avery, I'm going to come to you next with this one. When we think about the future of cities, I think with both public spaces and with technology, there's a lot of question about social inclusion. You talked earlier about the High Line, and one of the sort of sub-themes of the High Line the last few years has been people getting priced out of Chelsea, right? And concerns around that. With autonomous vehicles, and Avery knows where this is going, there's a lot of concern that if and when autonomous vehicles come onto the market, you can buy your own. The way things are going right now, it seems highly likely that that's going to be a product for the elite. They're going to cost a lot of money, which raises questions: are we going to be building cities with public spaces for that only the wealthy can afford, and they're going to be driving around in autonomous vehicles that only the wealthy can ride in, which means you have a two-tier transportation system. So when we think about the future of city, how do we ensure that we're building cities that everyone can flourish in?
Yeah, and I think that the one theme we're going to hear pervasively today. Thanks. I think the one theme that we're going to hear pervasively today is about this concept of access, and access means very different things in very different contexts. It can be physical access, it can be social access, cultural access, logistical access. The way that I see autonomous vehicles playing into this is providing transportation access. But that's one component of kind of an overall system that works for everybody. I mentioned at the outset it excites me that cities are looking to become smart cities. This is a concept that's growing in popularity, and I think at the core of that for me is this focus on data and understanding that we can make smarter data-driven decisions that not only allow us to address current challenges, but to identify where systems are failing. So for autonomous vehicles in particular, I think that data is going to be the positive aspects of access to transportation of autonomous vehicles are tremendous. If you have autonomous vehicles deployed in a shared use, on-demand system, similar to a driverless shared Uber fleet, the price of transportation goes down much more. the access to underserved populations can potentially go up. But when you look at deployment scenarios, it's going to be incumbent to have that data on the back end that confirms that we're actually providing more access from these technologies, from projects, from everything from the High Line to a development project in Baltimore. You need the data behind it to actually show that you're meeting your goals. And I think that's where, when I think about autonomous vehicle deployment, it's not the technology. The technology in and of itself doesn't fix anything. Driverless cars don't necessarily make congestion better. They don't make safety necessarily better. But they can be deployed in such a way that they actually bring some tremendous transformative positive benefits. And I think that it's going to ultimately be, though, that data behind it. So whether you're talking about a transportation project or an artistic project, a cultural project, a social project, let's make sure we're measuring it on the back end and ensuring that the problems we're looking to address are actually being addressed by the technology or the innovation.
So for those who work in the real estate space here, is there data along those lines that you're tracking with regards to social inclusion to make sure that a project is hitting goals? I mean, these are real issues here in DC with many of you are going to know about the 11th Street Bridge project where these questions come up all the time.
Still to the 11th Street Bridge, I think it's great to connect one of the more transformative neighborhoods, Capitol Riverfront, with Anacostia, Ward 7 and 8. The challenge is it's going to bring so much energy, so much opportunity that it does squeeze out artists, local residents, and the only way to handle that is a kind of a three-pronged approach of during construction and development, you have people who are local who are working on the projects of a real estate project. Second, the tenants that move in that they're hiring local, like restaurants and hospitality. And third, community engagement, where there is opportunity for public space for people to interact and engage. One example of, and this is incumbent upon the developers to make it a focus of not just bringing in new residents to consume what was formerly a underrated or overlooked neighborhood, it's also to participate. So one of the recent buildings I just finished, Anthology, it actually includes a video jukebox projected onto a wall with several local artists showing short films and animation. And the residents can actually control what's played, how long it's played, how often. And at the end of the year, there are opportunities to have their own film festival. So they are contributing to what made H Street interesting and cool. They're participating with their own art gallery. And that's something I want to continue on, where it's not just bringing in new residents from, because my market is not just local DC residents, it's from people from San Francisco, from New York, taking jobs in administration or wherever. And I want to give them the opportunity to insert themselves into their own neighborhood.
Marina, can I go to you? Yeah, you're right next to Gallaudet, right? With Pigmental Studios?
We're right on the campus. Yeah.
You're right on the campus. That's a really unique location, I think, and you're from LA, right? So most companies that are coming into DC, this used to be what I did when I was in the mayor's office, they're locating downtown, maybe they're locating in a newer area like Navy Yard, but being in Gallaudet in that northeast quadrant is unique. Could you talk about the reasons that brought you there and what advantages you have being in a location like that, really within a neighborhood and within a campus?
Well, when I first came out here, I was looking all over the place. Am I?
I think you're on. Okay. You're actually on.
Looking all over the place, and really got to know the different neighborhoods. And there were extraordinary benefits for the different neighborhoods that we looked at. It was a complete accident that I was asked to go and meet with the folks at Gallaudet. And I did it as a courtesy, actually. I was trying to appease somebody because I really wanted a different piece of property. But when I met the Gallaudet group, I was instantly energized by their hope and desire and passion to engage with Pigmental as a creative entity. And they showed me how, they inspired me as to how we, as a creative business entity, could engage on the campus and engage in the local community and influence the high schoolers and the elementary school is, and especially the Gallaudet students. And I went home that night and I looked at this idea of how wonderful it would be for Pigmental to come to DC and engage in the high-tech aspect of it and engage in the existing industries. Then I thought about how incredibly unique and rewarding it would be to work not from the outside in, but from the inside out, to be able to engage with the students at Gallaudet and allow them the opportunity to teach us as a creative company new things about communication, about culture, about opening up aspects that are not generally available to them, the students, and to us. And it allowed me to see Gallaudet as a culture within a culture that was looking in some ways to integrate its culture into the culture around it and opening up doors that I think previously were closed. And that excited me. That excites me about what I see could happen in Washington, D.C. I see pockets of communities that are passionate and on the edge of what they do, and amazing resources, support. But there's not a network yet that I see that engages all of these pockets of communities that could raise the spirit of Washington, D.C. to where I think it belongs. It's a jewel, it's a diamond, and it's very unique, I think, on this planet. And I know I speak as a passionate creative here, but a very wise mentor of mine once said, a diamond doesn't see its sparkle. It only can see the reflection of its impact through the eye of the beholder. And I think I come to DC and I see this incredible diamond that is there and needs to be seen by its own people and connected by its own people in the communities, and raise up this community to be a standard that it already is but isn't known to be in the world. And so when we talk about connectivity, we talk about technology, and we talk about creativity and the arts, I really also want to talk about the people in this town, in this city, that make it what it is. Very, very passionate, knowledgeable, engaged community that I'm really very, very excited and proud to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. Kevin?
Yeah, I just want to add on that. I was born and raised in Los Angeles and spent some time in San Francisco, and when I discovered DC, I felt the exact same way, that DC, a lot of people know this, but maybe they don't celebrate it enough, but DC is a fantastic city, and it's a city that is on a trajectory to become, Berlin, London, Paris, and people underestimate, sometimes in meetings with my colleagues who are from DC, they have a filter of, well, DC has always been this way or that way, and it can't become something new and reinvented. And I feel like I come with fresh eyes and see, no, actually, we are not valuing this area enough, or this property or this community enough. So we have to remove that veneer.
I think that I couldn't agree more. DC, I think many of you, I bet, would agree with this as well. We're becoming the global city we always should have been. Is that right? And I'm going to ask one concise final question of each group here, of everyone here. But if we can get the screen back on for how to tweet questions, I think it's @CulturalDC and then #FutureCity. Go ahead and do that if you have a question for the panel. But along those lines of making DC the most amazing city in the future that it can be, I want to ask if everyone can, in literally 30 seconds or less, if there's one, everyone here is well-traveled, you know a lot about other cities in the US and around the world. If there's one program you've seen, whether it's about the arts, whether it's about the future of technology or economic development, that you'd love to bring here, what would that be? And I'll actually start this off myself, and I'll say that my example of something that would be worth exploring is a concept called mobility as a service, which has taken off in Helsinki and some other Scandinavian cities, where residents actually have a card, like a smart card, a really smart card, that you could use for ride share, bike share, streetcar, bus, metro. Employers can pay for it. It can be tax deductible, but it's basically like getting everything that you need to get around, apart from your own car, in that card, which can be subsidized by government or your employer as need be. It really nudges people away from all of the consumption of a single occupancy vehicle. To me, that's a fascinating model that I think is going to catch on. Mobility as a service from Helsinki. Do you have a thought?
Yes. It's not working.
Nodding. Yep.
I double down on our bridges. I know some of our bridges aren't that great, but the bridges around DC are attractive. And I think the 11th Street Bridge could be the next moonshot, I think, much like maybe Prague, and shoot for that. That's a very high aim. The second one I'd say is, even though we lost the Corcoran School of Design, I think we would do ourselves a great service in being a feeder for VCU or MICA for students to come, artists to come, present here, and support the arts.
I think on my end in particular, I'm really excited about working on the CNO Canal Master Plan as a way to think about how public space, what it actually means in DC, and what it actually means to work with a piece of social historic element that can actually bring a lot of different layers of interest and opportunity to not only that sector of the city, but to other people from DC to come and access that area, which right now is kind of here and there, right? So the idea of actually creating a public space that speaks to DC, that speaks to the history, rather than creating a high line, which we often get talked about. I want to do a high line here or there. That's not the solution. The solution is creating something that's intrinsic to its history. That's what I'm most excited about. You have a mic.
I think I'm working. For me, it's really finding a way to connect the business community, the tech community with the educational community. I think the future of any city is its children, and the exposure of these children to the opportunities that they could engage in and they could dream about and they could bring to fruition.
Is there a city where you've seen that done well, or a program?
Yeah, I've created it in my head, but it doesn't quite exist yet.
So we're going to import it from your head to DC and be a wonderful future city. I like
think
it.
the Greeks were talking about it a very long time ago.
I really would like to focus still on that data piece, and I would love to see DC try to establish itself as, I think there are US cities that have done a pretty good job in some places of using data to do a better job of deploying transportation or of deploying housing.
One example.
Of one of the
It could be a part of like using data in a particular way well, but I think it's always helpful to have a concrete example.
Yeah, I think the way that Boston's thinking about autonomous vehicles is really interesting right now. I don't necessarily think they've got it right yet. Nobody does, but they are committed to measuring and to adjusting, and they're not locking themselves into a solution and then waiting until they get to the end to recalibrate. I would love to see DC take that same sort of commitment and apply it not just to transportation, but apply it to housing, apply it to the arts, to our transit systems, to public spaces, and really start to get some data that allows us to make smarter decisions and to frankly be a little more accountable for the decisions we're making, and ensure that they're having the impacts that we were expecting them to.
Great.
Yeah, I think for me, it's looking at that skills gap that exists and trying to match up workforce development with employment creation, right? And so we're working on it in Baltimore. We've got some specific stuff that we're doing with looking at even on smaller scales, trying to expose people from extremely underprivileged neighborhoods to the trade skills, right? And not putting them through necessarily a degree achieving program, but just letting them see what welding is, right? Letting them be exposed to what working with wood is, and then they can make a decision after that if they want to go on and pursue these as a job skill set. You can see cities like Boston and Austin and Pittsburgh are doing a pretty good job, but no one, I think, really stands out as a shining example of taking workforce development as a whole, and trying to figure out how do we train, how do we create this labor force that needs to exist to take the jobs that are going to be created as these companies grow and excel and move and take root in these different cities. And so just got to keep an eye on that and really work on training the labor pool and then creating the jobs on the other side, making sure it's a closed loop system.
That's great. All right, let's take, we had a question from the audience and it disappeared. Could we bring that back? Wonderful, there it is. So a question that was tweeted from Mark Chalfant. How can arts organizations that provide experiences as opposed to products be included in long-term development? I assume that means long-term real estate development. Take it away.
In some ways, it depends on what the nature of your experience is, but one example I'd point out is, again, next to our project, or in our project next to the baseball stadium, we recognize that we have 3 million people, 3 million visitors walk down our street in front of our building. That's good for retail, it's good for residential rental, but also I wanted to create a white box space for arts, for experiences, and this is just a pop-up. Maybe sometimes it is retail, but sometimes I've partnered with Cultural DC actually on how to program that. During baseball games, there's only 81 games a year, and then the non-game days, there's 280 days, 284 days, right? And that's an opportunity that we can give the space for free for an arts organization to use it, reinvent it, transform it. And that's something that that neighborhood is going to sorely need when there isn't 40,000 people on that particular day.
Yeah, I'll just chime onto that. I think in Port Covington, we've got about 3 miles of shoreline, all of which are completely blocked off from human access for years of industrial stuff and railway and that sort of thing. And so, there is a product being created, right? And so if you build a path that allows you to kind of traverse this shoreline, it gives you the opportunity to, number one, do it in a very unique way. You can have art installations along it. You can give people the ability to go and travel and see new, interesting, rotating, cool things, but then be exposed to, a beautiful waterfront that you otherwise wouldn't be, and making sure it's open to everybody, for sure.
Workshops. I think arts organizations can provide workshops for local communities, for local schools, allow the kids to come in and play with clay and play with paint and engage with artists in the field that can actually guide them and encourage them and support them and inspire them.
Well, one advice I have for some arts organizations is think of yourself as a retailer. Go find the people, go where the people are. One of the most successful organizations I've seen is Fringe, the Fringe Festival, where they actually go out and engage the public with their performances. I don't always see them all the time, but that's one other way to really bring your experience to the people.
Well, we're almost out of time. So, I think actually just stemming off of that question here, I think there's a lot of people in the audience that want to be engaged in shaping the future of this city or the future of another city if that's where they happen to live. So let's get tactical for a second. Do you have suggestions or thoughts on how someone who's in the arts or someone who is just living in a district neighborhood where they'd like to see more activity, more engagement, more jobs potentially, how they can shape their community? Thoughts on what tactically someone should do? Go ahead, Avery.
I'll take the cop-out answer on this. I think forums like this are tremendous, and promoting
That is a cop-out.
more of these sorts
Total
of
cop-out.
intersections of the arts and business. I don't think there are enough of these, though. I think that putting my being able to sit in a staging and ask tough questions about how do we include culture in mobility systems, that's hard. That gets me thinking a different way, and hopefully that gets the arts community thinking a different way too. So I think that creating more spaces like this is useful. So I would encourage, whether it's Cultural DC or others throughout Washington, to create similar spaces for these sorts of conversations.
Yeah, I would say, when you see these developments happening, I think that the developer has to ask themselves, where did the stuff hanging on the walls come from? Where did that sculpture come from? Where does the furniture come from? And in as much as you can make all of that come from the local art community and be something unique and something that tells a story, I think it's, that's the path we need to go down. And it's up to the artist organizations to engage the developers directly and say, look, before you order X number of mundane furniture that's going to sit in the lobby or hang some knockoff stuff on the wall, why don't you do something local that tells a real story and connects you with the community that's here? And I think we both sides have a responsibility to do that.
Other thoughts?
Well, I just had an example for you, which was Florence and the Renaissance, the idea of having a city that supports a creative community entirely, fully, embraces it, creates something that is far bigger than the individual moments. So I think this is a city that can do that.
And I think just to add to that, to become involved in the development of public projects, many public projects actually have public forums like this, and many of them actually need advocates for different aspects of the project, whether it's an advocate for arts and culture that ensures that, as you were mentioning, whatever arts and culture funding is directed to the project is actually experiential and touches the community, whether it's people that need to volunteer to actually help advocate for governmental funding, or whether it's just to be able to bring out the voices of the community. That's what actually is necessary to create a successful, well-balanced public project, and we really need those voices. Us as designers, we're balancing a lot of different aspects, and we need someone to help guide us in what actually matters for that community. So if you're not a developer or if you're not an artist, but you are invested and interested participating in these forums, we have them for the C&O Canal, I'm sure they happen for other projects in DC, actually you can make a huge impact in the development of that future space.
And I think we're going to end it there. But I want to say that it is true. I was teasing Avery earlier about his cop-out answer, but having been, doing economic development strategy in the mayor's office for quite a while, I don't remember any forums like this. So it is true that this is unique, and I do think it's valuable. And I want to salute Cultural DC and thank Marina Stage for hosting, and thank all the panelists here for contributing to such a lively conversation. Thanks.